You're thanking everyone on Twitter that came before you. Todd, are you trying to hint that maybe you're calling it quits, dude?
I don't think there's any question about that one.
Just to be clear, you said there's no doubt, so you're done, right? You're not coming back.
Oh,
right?
yeah, most definitely.
In October of 2022, the once all-pro running back Todd Gurley officially announced that he was done playing with football. After not playing in 2021, it officially announced his retirement in October of 2022. Todd Gurley, who we all know once ran absolutely wild in the NFL, fell off of the cliff just as quick as he rose to the top. Today we're going to talk about and reflect and look back at the career of Todd Gurley. What it do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Triple DS. Look, guys, for this video specifically, I've been meaning to talk about this because from when I was watching Todd Gurley, no one could match him as far as skill, athleticism, what he was doing on the field. The only person I could think of that would come close would be Christian McCaffrey in 2019. But other than that, if you watched Todd Gurley, there was no one like him. He was truly unstoppable. Yes, this video is more so to reflect on the career, but I also just wanted to give thanks for what an amazing time it was when we would watch him on our TV screens. How great he always looked in these games. If this is your first time on the channel, feel free to smash that subscribe button. We're on the road to 1250 subs. Thank you guys so much for the support this year. This is our, I'd say, 6th or 7th What Happened To video, so feel free to check out the playlist. I'll put it right up here. But with that out of the way, y'all, let's go ahead and get right into it. Todd Gurley, born in Baltimore, Maryland, lived with his parents, both mom and dad, 2 brothers, and his sister. Knew he had a talent at this sport by the age of 6. His coaches, even at just 6 years old, saw the talent so well that they had him playing with the 9 through 11-year-old teams. Guys, this guy is 6 years old. Have you seen the difference between a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old? By the time Todd Gurley reached high school, his mom and his siblings moved to Tarboro, North Carolina, which had about 11,000 residents, so a relatively small town. When he went to high school, he actually for a little while contemplated pursuing a football path. He'd actually rather be playing basketball at this time, but coaches had seen his tape. They were so impressed with what they had seen that they actually convinced Todd Gurley to eventually join the team. Even though he did join football, this did not stop him from pursuing other paths. So he was a dominant player in basketball, and he was actually a really good track star. In his junior year, he played both running back and defensive back, where he almost ran for 1,500 yards while scoring 26 touchdowns. Gurley was so talented that he took his team to the North Carolina 2A championship game where they won 21-3. And as impressive as his junior year was, in his senior year, he absolutely dominated, rushing for over 2,600 yards and scoring 38 touchdowns. He was named North Carolina's Associated Press Player of the Year. It was during this campaign, however, that he suffered injuries to both of his ankles. Despite injury and all, Todd Gurley was not going to be denied another championship. He still ran for 242 yards and another 4 touchdowns, leading Tarboro High School to a 39-36 victory. Despite the injuries physically, he was also actually having some tough times mentally. It was around this time that Todd Gurley had actually lost his childhood friend to a car accident. And not too long after that incident, his older brother, whom he looked up to, was arrested for armed robbery. He had lost 2 people that were very close to him, yet he was still performing as he was, grieving for his loved ones as well as his own physical injuries on the field. So in his senior year, he showed his toughness, leading him to a 4-star recruit and joining the Georgia Bulldogs. During his true freshman year, he immediately contributes for the Bulldogs, running for 1,385 yards with 17 touchdowns, leading Georgia to the SEC championship. And although they do lose to Alabama, it shows you what this guy was capable of even early on, even at the next level, which was college. This specific year, he actually finishes also in 2nd place in rushing yards, trailing only the one and only Johnny Manziel. His sophomore season was a bit of a drop-off. After a strong start versus Clemson, he was dealt more injuries to his ankle and to his hip. So he finished his season with only 989 yards, 10 touchdowns, while tagging along 37 receptions for another 400 yards and another 6 receiving touchdowns. Despite not playing his best football, and despite missing games here and there, he was still named All-SEC second team. You fast forward to his junior year, and despite it starting very promising, In October 9th, he was actually suspended for a month by the NCAA for selling autographs and memorabilia. He was found guilty of it and was suspended for a month. Unfortunately for Todd Gurley, things would only get worse because once he returned to the gridiron, he tears his ACL on a meaningless snap in his first game back. And I say meaningless snap because Georgia had all but won this game already, yet they still had Gurley on the field. That does end Todd Gurley's year. Still though, in the few games that he had played, which is just 6 games, he amassed over 900 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. Despite his injuries and all, Todd Gurley knows that his stock is high, so he foregoes his senior year and he enters the NFL draft. This is the part where I like to look at what the team was doing that drafted him the year prior. So let's go ahead and talk about the 2014 St. Louis Rams. Yes, you heard me right. In 2014, the St. Louis Rams, because they hadn't moved to LA yet, were looking to improve from their 7-9 season the year prior in 2013. Jeff Fisher was in year 3, Sam Bradford was going into year 5, but unfortunately tore his ACL in the preseason. The other notable running backs in this team were rookie Trey Mason and Zach Stacy. Both probably deserve their own What Happened To video because they actually both had promising showings and just off the field issues derailed both of them. They finished 6-10 and wind up with the 10th overall pick. The Rams were looking for some sort of explosiveness for their offense. So with the 10th overall selection, the Rams draft Todd Gurley. Keep in mind, guys, not too long ago, Todd Gurley had tore his ACL. So the worry was, even though he was drafted 10th overall, the worry was that he was not going to play this season. But again, Todd Gurley does show his toughness. He actually only misses 2 games his rookie year. And almost right through the get-go, he proves that he was definitely worth the 10th overall selection. In week 4 against the Arizona Cardinals, he marks the first time in 4 straight games that he rushes for at least 100 yards. He was named a Pro Bowler and Rookie of the Year. And just remember, in those first 4 games, it wasn't like he was getting just 100 yards. He amassed 556 yards total, marking the most by any running back through their first 4 games. In the end, he finishes with over 1,100 yards on 4.8 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns, to go along with another 21 receptions for just under 200 yards. And the Rams finished 7-9. But one thing to note, in the games that Gurley does play, the Rams are actually 6-5. Although his rookie year was very promising, his second year as a pro would kind of bring him back down to earth. In the 2016 season, the team moves to LA, the Rams draft Jared Goff, trade away Sam Bradford, so the plan is clearly to feed Gurley while Goff develops. Jared Goff is the #1 overall pick at this point, but he is not ready just yet. So defenses know that you're going to have to contain Gurley. It's the same thing that happened to Steven Jackson a few years back with the same team. After a strong start at going 3-1, the Rams actually spiral out of control to the point where they lose to the Falcons midway in the season, 42-14, resulting in the Rams having a record of 4-9 at this point, and Jeff Fisher officially being fired. Ultimately, the Rams finished 4-12 during this campaign, so they were brought back down to earth. Not even just Gurley, the Rams as a whole. Gurley regressed from a statistical standpoint, rushing for only 885 yards on 3.2 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns, albeit he did have 43 receptions. As rough as things were for the Rams, there was definitely a light at the end of this tunnel. 2017 marks the year that the Rams hire Sean McVay, and this is the year that Gurley goes off. Let me emphasize that week 1 against the Colts sets the tone for the rest of the year for the Rams. Although Gurley himself had a so-so game, the Rams dominated 46-9, and things would only get better at the very least for Gurley. In the 15 games that he started, Todd Gurley had over 2,000 scrimmage yards and a total of 19 touchdowns. To be more specific, he ran for over 1,300 yards, rushed for 13, caught 64 passes for another 780 yards and another 6 touchdowns. All in all, the Rams do finish 11-5, but unfortunately do lose to the Falcons in the wild card round. Despite a disappointing end to their season, it was still a promising showing of things to come. Todd Gurley was named Offensive Player of the Year. He actually finished second in MVP votes, losing only to Tom Brady this year. Ranked number 6 in the NFL Top 100. Remember, this is your peers that are voting. So his peers voted him as the 6th best player in the NFL. Because of this absolutely great year. The Rams signed Gurley to a contract extension for 4 years for $60 million, with $45 million of that guaranteed, making him the highest paid running back in the NFL. Gurley was on top of the NFL hierarchy, and it didn't hurt that the Rams were finally playing in LA. And let's be real, y'all, if you're playing in New York or LA or Dallas or something like that, you have a lot of eyes on you, and Gurley was performing like no other. 2018 was a near duplicate of 2017. This is the year that the Rams started 8-0, and during that 8-0 streak, Gurley amasses 800 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, with another 31 receptions for 350 yards and another 4 touchdowns. All in all, over 1,000 yards scrimmage and 15 touchdowns through just 8 games. Okay guys, I've got to take a quick pause here real quick. From here on out, for whatever reason, my microphone turned off, and I'm really not sure why, but thankfully my camera, which has its own separate mic, did pick up my voice, albeit at a bit lower of a quality. So I do apologize for how my audio sounds from here on out, but I thought I'd just let you guys know that. Everything is absolutely great. All great things must come to an end, y'all. From here on out, this is going to start spelling the beginning of the end for Todd Gurley. He finishes the season with 1,251 rush yards, 17 touchdowns, nearly 60 receptions for nearly 600 yards, and another 4 receiving touchdowns. Despite the high totals for this year, he missed the final 2 games of the regular season. And that's not including that the 2 games prior to missing those, he was actually very limited. So in 4 games, something has felt off. The cause for him missing the final 2 games and also being limited in the previous 2 games was due to knee inflammation. People were assuming that this was due to natural wear and tear, so they gave him some time off. So to kind of recap, y'all, what's going on here? Limited, weeks 14 and 15. Out, weeks 16 and 17. The Rams have a wild card round bye, so he's more or less been out of it for about 5 weeks now. This brings us to the Dallas game in the divisional round. Todd Gurley still doesn't feel quite 100%, but he does tough it out. In this divisional game, he does run the ball for 115 yards and another touchdown, helping the Rams get past the Cowboys in the divisional round. And that, guys, I think is the last time that Gurley has a really, really good game. In the NFC Championship against the New Orleans Saints, Todd Gurley only runs the ball 4 times for 10 yards and a touchdown. It became very apparent something was clearly not right. Despite this, the Rams do prevail and head to the Super Bowl. But the question remained, just how unwell was Todd Gurley? There was no sign of disciplinary action, and you gave him the time off, and he looked good in the divisional game. What's going on? Why aren't you guys playing him? Now we fast forward to the Super Bowl with the Rams taking on the Patriots. In the Super Bowl, he did log more snaps compared to his NFC Championship game, but he really didn't get anything going, only getting 35 rush yards and no touchdowns. Without a 100% healthy Gurley, the Rams could only muster 3 points in their loss to the Patriots. The Super Bowl really showed or showcased just how off the rails Todd Gurley was from a performance standpoint. Just from 2 months ago where he was dominating the NFL to what we saw in the NFC Championship game and in the Super Bowl itself. About a month after the Super Bowl, it was discovered that Todd Gurley had been suffering from arthritis in his left knee. This is the same left knee where he tore his ACL in college. For the record, if you tear your ACL, you are much more likely to develop arthritis upon reconstruction, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In 2019, so his second year into his big, massive contract, his production dropped significantly. In the 15 games that he played, he had only 857 yards for 12 touchdowns on just under 4 yards a carry. He also dipped in receptions with only 31 receptions and just about 200 yards and another 2 touchdowns. Keep in mind that the Rams were force-feeding Todd Gurley the ball. So it's not like he's not getting the ball. They're giving it to him despite him struggling. But the firepower, the cuts, the swiftness, it's just not there anymore. In no game in the 2019 campaign did he reach over 100 yards. The Rams themselves finished 9-7 and missed the playoffs, clearly missing the explosiveness that Todd Gurley once brought. With Gurley regressing, the question now arose on where do they go from here. Gurley was the highest paid running back, and the entirety of the 2019 season fell flat. And with this kind of injury, or with arthritis, it's one of those things that won't really get better over time. So it's very unlikely that he will ever return to his old form. And the Rams do ultimately make a tough decision to move on from Todd Gurley, ending what was arguably one of the greatest 2-year stretches of anyone's career in 2017 and 18. If you watch the NFL, you know that people are always very hesitant to pay running backs. You saw what happened with CMC, and Todd Gurley was the epitome, the perfect example of why you don't want to pay a running back. Yes, not everyone develops arthritis, but owners are going to use this to their advantage. This is why we don't pay running backs. This is why X, Y, and Z. And guys, just to put the timetable into perspective, in the divisional game against the Cowboys, he was still regarded as the best player in football. And not even 2 years later, he was released by the Rams. So what happens now? Where does Todd Gurley go from here? Would anyone be willing to take this chance on him, knowing what is going on in those kneecaps? The Falcons opt to give Todd Gurley a chance. They were kind of looking for a running back anyway after not re-signing Devontae Freeman themselves. So he signed to a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. A far cry from 4 years, $60 million. But guys, if it wasn't apparent with the Rams in his final year with them, it was apparent now with the Falcons that explosiveness had ceased to exist. The Falcons clearly weren't the Rams either, because they had an 0-5 start and their head coach Dan Quinn was fired. And although he played decent in the first half of the season, something really went wrong in the final 6 games. In those final 6 games, he ran for a grand total of 94 yards, no touchdowns, and just 2.6 yards a carry during that stretch. The Falcons lost every single game that Gurley was a part of in those final 6 games, excluding a game against the Raiders, in which they won but Gurley wasn't playing, and finished with a 4-12 record. Gurley finishes the season with just under 700 yards, 9 touchdowns, 25 receptions, and just 164 yards. This is all in 15 games, y'all. The fall from grace for this guy was absolutely crazy. If you want to talk about Max Kellerman's fall off a cliff theory, look no further than Todd Gurley. I mean, like, how can you perfectly describe it? After the Dallas game, it just plummeted more than Dogecoin. I still can't believe I invested. As of January 3rd, 2021, Todd Gurley has never carried the ball ever again in the NFL. He is not re-signed by the Falcons, and after a failed tryout with the Ravens, he goes unsigned, period, in the 2021 campaign. And again, after not being signed in 2022, in October of this year, he officially announces his retirement from the NFL, thus ending a once promising career of truly one of the most dominant running backs, and at the very least in my time watching football. There was truly not many that could cut like him, had an explosiveness like him, and to boot, was a receiving running back like him. And due to something unforeseen as far back as college, it came right back to haunt him in the pros. Like I said, hindsight is 2020. There's no way you can predict that an ACL tear all the way back from college would come back to haunt you 6 years later. Most players in the NFL don't develop arthritis until after they're done playing football. It didn't help that his workload was absolutely tremendous. He was a one-man show for the Rams for a very long time. Look, we could talk all day about the workload management and how it played a factor, but one thing you gotta remember, who else could you trust with the football? And on top of that, would we still be talking about Todd Gurley the way we do now if he didn't have the ball in his hands as often as he did? It is something for you to think about, but I 100% get why workload could play a factor on this as well. And I said I touched on this a little bit, but I did do some research, and I'll leave a link as my source at the bottom. But from what I've read, if you tear your ACL upon reconstruction of your knee, you are 3 to 5 times more likely to develop arthritis in that knee. Maybe he doesn't play that one meaningless snap in the Georgia game, and we might still be talking about Todd Gurley as one of the best to do it right now in the NFL. But sometimes that's the circle of life. You can't really predict what will happen. Things happen. There's different universes out there, so who knows? Maybe Todd Gurley's playing in one of those. So it does suck to see, man, and I just want to wrap it up by again saying thank you to Todd Gurley. This was long overdue. I know you retired in October, and it's now almost December, if not December when I upload it. Thanks for all the great football, and thanks for helping me lose in fantasy a few years back. I do appreciate it. And to coaches out there, man, if you've got the game won, pull your players out. Pull them out. Why are you playing them? If this is your first time on the channel, feel free to drop a like, comment, subscribe, turn those notifications on. We try to post a what happened to video at the very least once every 2 weeks or once a month, depending on how just genuinely busy things get in the world. At the very least, there will always be a weekly pick'em on this channel if you are interested in that, and you do have an opportunity to win money. DM me on my Instagram if you want to learn a little bit more, or just check out the post that I pinned. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do love doing these things, and I don't do it without y'all support. So if you guys could give this thing a like, push it in the algorithm a little bit more, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys again, and until next time, shaboy!